Welcome to You Don't Know Ball. Today, we are going to be going over the NFL teams' floors for the 2024 NFL season. We did all the ceilings last week, so now we're going to move into the floors. As always, we're going to go division by division. So this is basically worst case scenario for any NFL team. Dobbs, where do you have, starting off in the AFC East, the Buffalo Bills?
So I have worst case scenario for the Bills being just barely missing the playoffs, right? And I want to be completely clear and transparent with everybody before I even start. Before we even start, this needs to be explained. I did not take into account the whole because I started doing this and then I realized how quickly that it would just make this incredibly boring. I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, if the team's starting quarterback gets injured, here's the scenario. Because if I did that for every team is it has a terrible, terrible floor. I'm looking at it from the perspective of team stays healthy, and this is the worst case scenario if you have a healthy team all year, right? So just to be clear. So for me, worst case scenario for the Bills, barely missing the playoffs, as I said. And the reasoning is more than anything, look, the Bills have shown us they have high pedigree, they have one of the best QBs in the league. And generally speaking, that's enough of a combo to get you in the playoffs a lot of times, right? It's a QB-driven league. Yes, the receiving talent has taken a bit of a dip when you lose Stephon Diggs. But you look around and you say, okay, you know what? We've got a very, very solid line relative to the rest of the league on the offensive side. Our defensive line has two really good players and a lot of ascending younger guys and just guys that have proven that they can play in the NFL consistently. Our linebacking core added Terrell Bernard, which is, in my opinion, a huge addition nobody really has been talking about, but big addition in free agency this year. And as far as the DB room goes, yeah, you're not the highest on your safety room per se, but you still have a damn good corner room. And in the reality situation is more than anything, as I said earlier, look, the Bills have shown us they have the pedigree. When you have the pedigree, you have the coach that knows how to get you back and back to the playoffs over and over again. Generally is the recipe. And besides losing Stephon Diggs and, a few other guys, and yes, they were big guys for what the Bills have done, but they were aging. You can't expect an aging guy to produce the same as he was. All the Bills really did is kind of move on, and that's the reality of the situation. And I think that they moved on into a situation that's a little bit worse now, but I don't think they're going to make this huge drop off like a lot of people are thinking.
Yeah, I think this is something that they can build on. I think when a team has success for so long but isn't able to get over the hump, you have to take that one step back. And obviously, as a floor, I just think Josh Allen gives them such a high floor, and they should be in playoff contention every year because I had them as well as barely missing the playoffs because I don't think a lot of people are super high on the Bills in terms of, oh, they're probably going to go super far this year. And it'd be kind of crazy to see them go far this year after everyone has been so high on them the last couple of years. And who knows, maybe that happens. But I think the expectation for the floor of the Bills is that they will be kind of like a wild card team, maybe a division winner. So with that being said, I would say their floor is probably just scraping that playoff, that 7th seed, and maybe missing out, like you said. So moving in to our next team, we have the Miami Dolphins. So I have them a little bit lower than you do. So you have them as barely missing the playoffs. I have them as a top 16 pick. What scares me is I just don't know how Tua is going to play this year. Yes, he had a decent year last year. The contract negotiations are still going on. He doesn't have a deal. You take Chop Robinson, who I don't know if he's going to contribute right away. I think it would have been very beneficial for them to go for a guy like Graham Barton. And their interior offensive line still scares me. Their offensive line scares me as a whole. Teron Armstead, kind of a question mark if he's healthy. You bring in Brewer. I'm blanking on his last name or for his first name at center. Then you have Austin Jackson at right tackle. Yeah, Aaron Brewer. And so it's just yes, you get the ball out quick, right? That's the whole thing to try to neutralize the issues with the protection. But you go and sign OBJ, who is 30 plus years old. He hasn't really been able to stay healthy. And once OBJ goes down, that wide receiver 3 room is looking kind of iffy. And do you want to count on your pass rushers that, tore their shit last year and bank on Chop Robinson being able to make an impact day one? And that's just why I think they can be a top 16 pick. The Dolphins are one of the shakiest teams in the NFL to me.
So again, look, I'll say you made a damn good case. I can't blame you for thinking what you're thinking at all, right? But in my opinion, I'm gonna have to disagree only because I think, and again, this is we have very similar viewpoints, but I think I view it a little bit differently in terms of like I don't look like in terms of regular season play. Tua is a top 10 quarterback right now, right? Like it's like when Tua's out there like doing his thing week to week, it's generally a pretty good week. And so that's why I gotta give credit where it's due. Like he didn't right, we're not missing anybody important now. Like it's not like we lost anybody crazy on offense. And to your point, OBJ is getting old, but it's not like it's a bad addition. And like I've also been saying, I've been kind of saying the whole off season, you added pass catchers in the draft also, where I feel like, there's guys who can come in and produce in this offense right away from day one. The way that the offense is designed with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle kind of just taking everybody, you're gonna have guys underneath that are able to do their thing. And as far as the O-line goes, I'm with you. Like the O-line is still definitely a concern. The O-line is definitely still far from feeling shored up about because there's a lot of question marks. Even, I'll go back to Teron Armstead. If I'm not mistaken, there was a lot of like, he might be retiring.
Right.
We don't know his status going. So that kind of tells you a lot already, like in terms of like, there was already uncertainty going into the season. You have to wonder how someone's going to play when that was the case going into the year. There is a lot of question marks on the offensive line. But then over to the defense. There's been kind of this narrative like the Dolphins are soft as shit on defense. I see a lot of I read the comments, like everyone's the Dolphins are soft as shit. Look, as much as the Dolphins didn't have a good year defensively last year, I think the reality is when you look at it on paper, though, they have guys that can play. And the biggest problem is just that their pass rushers, to your point, don't stay healthy and haven't stayed healthy. But if these pass rushers can stay healthy, and now with Shaq Barrett and Chop Robinson, like you have a damn good deep pass rushing unit. It's just a matter of being able to stay out there. But as far as the DB room goes as well, when you added Jordan Poyer this year, like you have a really good DB room now as far as your starters. You have really good depth with Cater Kohu, Cam Smith, Needham. Like you got depth. It's not the greatest depth in the world, but you got it. And I think that's kind of just the biggest thing is when I look at the Dolphins, I'm like, okay, you know what? They're not like an absolute world beating roster. And a lot of people were mad that I had them or you had them in the Super Bowl contending tier in as far as the ceiling goes. But that's the thing is I think that's just how I look at it. Like at their absolute ceiling, this team could win a Super Bowl. Is it likely? Like, I don't think it's likely at all. And then in terms of the floor, it's like, I don't think their floor is very low. Like, I still think this is a playoff team. I think they have a depth where you need it. And that's kind of just the bottom line for how I look at the Dolphins.
I'll do barely miss playoffs for this one. You sold me a little bit. My only kind of counter argument to that before we move on is they had 11 wins last year. The Seahawks had 9, and the Seahawks picked 16. So it's kind of like, it's really close. It's really close. So I'll give it to you there. New England Patriots, we both have as a top 3 pick. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory. Brand new coaching staff, brand new rookie quarterback. Jacoby Brissett may be playing. You have question marks on the offensive line, question marks kind of in the receiving room, question marks kind of on defense. I think as a whole, if you were to list every single position on the New England Patriots, there would be far more question marks than there are answers. And that goes into the coaching staff. And I think at this point, ownership. I think you don't know, like, why are you interviewing GMs after you just had a draft? Why would you not try to get a GM earlier? I don't know. I don't know if they're going through with the GM position or if it's Elliott Wolf going to be making all the decisions. He basically sounds like a GM. I just feel like this franchise won for so long, and now the Mac Jones project didn't work out. And I think they're doing the right thing. I think they are kind of restarting, rebuilding to an extent, but I don't know if they necessarily set up Drake May to succeed this year.
Well, yeah, again, I'll keep echoing the same sentiment. Like, if Drake May is going to have success this year, it is going to be like a Justin Herbert-esque, like, yo, this guy's so much more pro ready than I thought he was. Like, yo, he made a huge jump in terms of like all he did was focus on football from the second that the draft process started until the day that the training camps ended and camp ends and we're starting the actual season, right? Like, if that's the only way it's going to happen. And again, I'm not there seeing these practices. I'm not here seeing Drake May's work ethic. I can't guarantee anything along those lines. But in terms of what I expect, right, we don't expect that to happen. Right? And again, I'm not. Look, Drake May. The verdict is still to be decided because I don't know. I have to see how he develops. But as far as this season, to your point, I don't think we're going to see even much of him. I don't think, and I think it would be smart for them to play it that way, as we've said the whole offseason. I don't necessarily expect to see Drake May much, if at all, this year. I think the Patriots know that they still have a lot of building to be done. And everything you just said, right? Like, you can't point at one spot of the ball in this team, besides maybe the DB room, the starting DBs, and say, like, all right, like, we got a really well-rounded unit. You can hand pick guys that are definitely really good at their position on this team, but you can't handpick a bunch of them. And you definitely can't handpick a way that this roster is going to win a bunch of games this year, if above 5-6. So that's why it's pretty simple to us. The Patriots have to be in that bottom tier of expectations.
And honestly, Pats fans, you should want to be a top 3 pick next year. Like, the way you have your quarterback. So if there's a guy in the top 3 that someone wants, you could trade out and get assets. Like, the Patriots are so much further away, like, than a lot of other teams. And when you have a young quarterback, you want to maximize their rookie contract. And the way to do it is, in my opinion, lose a lot of games. So moving on to our final team of the AFC East. And I want to apologize. I'm dealing with some sinus issues, so I probably sound all crazy. The New York Jets. So you have them as a top 16 pick. I have them as barely missing the playoffs. Where is that discrepancy? Why do you think that they are closer to a top 16 pick other floor than it is barely missing the playoffs?
Well, because I think, and then the Jets would probably have like the widest margin for anybody in terms of like the ceiling and the floor. But the reason is just like, look, let's break it down as simple as possible. We're already seeing that the writing on the wall that, and again, I don't buy into any of this shit. Let me be clear right off the bat. Like, to me, it's all just noise and bullshit. But you can already see the narrative the media is trying to spin. A-Rod, he's missing camp. He got other shit to do, and he doesn't care about the team, right? That's already what they're trying to spin it into. When in reality, man has been to 20 training camps, and he's just at that point of his career. It is what it is. Like, he's Aaron Rodgers, man. How much is he going to gain from getting a little bit of repertoire with his guys before? You know what I mean? And I'm not sitting here trying to defend him, but I'm also just looking at it objectively. Like, it's not as big of a deal as the media is making it out to be. But let's tie this together and say that some way, somehow, he doesn't get the rapport he needs, and he's just not the same Aaron Rodgers. And that injury took a big toll on Aaron Rodgers. And again, I'll say the Jets were the one team where I did throw the contingency in, because normally, again, I said I wouldn't think about injuries.
I was going to say, it almost has to with this
coming
team.
off the Achilles, I have to understand and really put it into the equation that, like, there's a somewhat chance that he could miss a solid chunk of time again if something were to go wrong, which is certainly not incredibly unlikely, right? Like, yeah, they did revamp the old line, but everyone they revamped it with is an older guy who is also potentially injury prone. If injuries start stacking up, that's really just how I looked at it. If injuries start stacking up, we know how this offense is, right? That's really all there is to it. Like, if injuries start stacking up, we know how the Hackett show goes. We've seen the story multiple times. I just feel like, and this was the final thing, this defense played so fucking good last year. Every single second, every single snap when they needed to, and they still, right? And they finished much better than we expected. It's still like right around that range where you're like, right around that 500 range. I don't know if I think that the defense could do that again this year if they had to do that again this year. You know what I mean? Like, not to sell them short, it's just really hard to play that well every single game, especially 2 years in a row. Like, it's just a lot of, and that's the thing. We're talking about it in terms of floor. That's if everything goes wrong, right? I mean, I don't expect it to go this way, but if it did, I could see them having another pick where you're like, all right, you know what? The Jets they really got to start thinking about the future at that point.
So I was kind of back and forth on this because we are only one tier apart, and I think I'll go with the top 16 pick. I think a lot of my restraints or like concerns come from injury, and I was trying to keep injury out of it as much as I can. But like you said, like, this is a team that's kind of hard to ignore when you have injury-prone linemen like they are. Then you bring in Mike Williams, who is one of the most injury-prone receivers. And to go back to your point, obviously, like, I think Tyrod Taylor is a step up from Zach Wilson or whoever the fuck they're, Chris Strevler, whoever's going to be playing quarterback for them. They never should have got rid of Mike White. But with that being said, I will agree with you. Like, if the offense isn't doing its job, and let's just say Aaron Rodgers is not available, the defense is not going to do what they did last year, because I feel like it's just going to be one of those, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, this is not going to get us anywhere. Like, it's so over with. I just think it would be such a morale and confidence killer if anybody but Aaron Rodgers is playing quarterback for them next year. So I will agree with you that top 16 is probably the spot that they're going to be at, because they were at 11 this year. So, yes, I think they improved, but I don't know if it's, enough to get them out of the top 16 if that scenario goes down. So this team.
If shit hits the fan again, like
this team and probably one other team is like the only other teams we'll probably do like injury concerns for. But that'll wrap up the AFC East